Here's how you get closer to your dream game than most beginners. Stop asking, what should I learn? And start asking, what does my dream game actually require? Because the people that actually finish games, they don't try to learn everything. They learn the few things that their game actually requires, and then they just ignore the rest. And I know that might sound like a small thing, but it actually changes everything. Now, if you're watching this, I assume that you are in this phase where you're just following your curiosity and making experiments so that you can learn the initial things required to you to make your first game. You're basically in a learning phase. You don't have the skill to make your first game yet, but you have the skill to make some small experiments. And most likely when you are in this phase, you do the mistake that most beginners do. They just follow their curiosity. They don't have a plan for what they're going to learn. They just learn things based on feel, based on vibe. And this can be a good thing in many ways. For example, if you're actually struggling, you're not just using AI or just copying code. You're actually going to remember and learn these things that you actually do. But it can also be a bad thing. And why is it a bad thing? Because just learning something that you aren't going to use in a real world project isn't actually necessary. It's not actually useful for you. And this is the thing with game development. It's so many different things. It's 1,000 different fields and problems and skills that you need just comprised into this one craft, which we call game development. And if you're just going to pick and choose from these 1,000 different things that you need to learn, okay, today I want to learn how to make pixel music or 8-bit music. I want to learn how I make pixel art. I want to learn how to make an inventory system. If you just pick and choose these small things based on how you feel, you're barely going to make any progress towards making your actual first game, because you're just picking and choosing all of these thousands of things and not scoping it down into what you actually need to learn to actually make your first game. And that's why this phase can be so dangerous and why it can be so time wasting, because you can just be in this, you can just I'm learning game development, right? I'm getting into game development. But you're just learning tons of useless things that you aren't going to directly use in your first game. So I think it's so important that you are intentional with what experiments and prototypes that you make in this phase. I'm not saying it's bad necessarily to just be in this phase where you're doing experiments and you're doing prototypes and not actually making a game. Of course, you need to do this as well. It's like a phase of learning. You can't just jump straight into watch an introduction video to the game engine and then just make your game. That's not how games work. But if you are smart and you actually focus on producing something, not just doing this for fun or based on feel, you actually want some results, you want a game, you want to monetize your games in the future, then you're going to be smart, not spend time on things that you don't need. For example, if your dream game is a horror game, don't spend time on the shooting, right? Because you likely don't, or in some horror games you do, but likely you don't need a complex shooting system in a horror game, or procedural world generation in a horror game. You likely don't need that. You need to be intentional of the first and dream game that you want to make. Think of, do I actually use this in my dream game? If not, if it's not relevant at all, don't do it, right? You don't need to learn it in that case, because you can spend that time learning something else. You can spend that time improving the lighting in a low lighting scenario, how to make a scene look good even in low lighting, for example. You can spend your time making a flashlight system. That's really good. And even though you make a flashlight system in your first game, you can learn both. If you spend that extra time just making improving the flashlight system, even just spending more time on one thing than trying to learn two, this one thing is going to be better. So you're going to have a better flashlight system, right? It's going to feel better. So be intentional about the systems and the prototypes that you make while you are in this learning phase before your first game. And also, don't be in this learning phase for too long. To give you a personal example, because I've made this mistake myself, that's why I'm making this video. It's when I made my first games, I wasn't really intentional about the dream games that I had. I've never had this idea of a dream game. I just like doing things. So for me, this was extra visible that I just was making things and not making much progress. But now I'm kind of figuring out that I want to do 3D games. I really enjoy making puzzle games. That's why I'm making a puzzle game right now. But my first games were mobile games and they were 2D shooter games. So I've spent a lot of time and learning into just making these 2D shooter games, which are very, as you can probably assume, they're very different from a 3D puzzle game that I'm making now, kind of like Portal. So obviously I still have the programming knowledge from these games and I still have the game engine familiarity. I still know how you make it a game. But it's very different. I didn't even have to manage scenes in the 2D shooter games because they're endless. Now I need one scene for each level. I have to manage the scene. I have to manage failure conditions. I have to manage all these managers, it's so like different and complex to what I'm used to. But if I made like a small 3D puzzle game as my first game, I would probably have already figured out like 50% of like the things that I needed in this game. It would have gone much smoother for me if I just like was intentional about the games that I wanted to make from the very beginning. So that's kind of why I'm making this video, so that you hopefully don't make the same mistake. And sure, like I'm getting over it now, but it would be better if I didn't waste months making like irrelevant games to the games that I want to make now and I want to try and monetize. Let's say you're starting to get more intentional about the prototypes that you make, and they're actually relevant and tailored to the dream and first game that you want to make, right? There's still one major issue that you can do, and that's going to waste you months, and that's going to be to have a fear of starting. So it's very easy when you are in this phase where you're making tons of prototypes, experiments, you're just kind of like learning, making tons of new projects in your game engine, right? Just like starting over, making small things, starting over, making small things, just doing a lot of different things. And this is fun. It's fun because if something doesn't work, okay, you're just like making a new project, finished. But that's not how a game is. Like a game, making a game, it's actually really hard, and there's going to be a lot of fears that you have when you're making a game where you can't just quit and make a new project. And if you just do this long enough, you just make like prototypes, you're going to notice as well that you just have this fear of starting. And it's very nice to just make new projects all the time and not just actually committing to starting and then not quitting when you actually start. Even experienced game developers that could very easily make like an entire game in probably like 7 days, they have this fear of starting. They have this fear of both starting, they have a fear of failure, they have like so many different fears. I can't come up with any more examples, that's why I said like so many, but at least those two, right? They have a fear of starting and like a fear of failing, that the game won't be good enough, it won't be well received, they won't make any money, it will just flop, get 0 downloads, right? And especially when you are in this phase where you're making prototypes and you haven't made a full game yet, it's going to have a lot of friction for you. It's going to be really hard. It's like going to be swimming upstream for you to just be conscious of this fear of starting and just like overwriting it. Like, no, I can't just make prototypes forever. I need to actually make a game. I need to become a game developer, because you only become a game developer after you've made a game. So after you've released one game, that's when you are a game developer. If you just make prototypes forever, then you aren't a game developer, you're just a prototype developer. So your goal should always be to finish your first game. Very likely, like probably before you even realize yourself, you're going to have enough skill. Probably just after like a few weeks, let's say maybe like 80 efficient hours of just like experimenting, making prototypes in a game engine, are you going to be able to finish your first game? Or at least start your first game so you can finish it. In practice, what you should do is that you should first learn like the basics of code by making some experiments. You should make like some small prototypes, make like a teleporting system, make like a small movement system, just make whatever. Just like do this for a couple of days. It doesn't really matter if it's relevant to your first game here. Just like make some small like movement systems or whatever. But after this, I want you to make small prototypes. This can be more unique things. You can have some ideas here. You have multiple systems, multiple scripts that have to work together into this one small prototype. And when you're making these small prototypes, I want you to be conscious of the first game that you want to make. Maybe plan out your first game a little bit already. Like even though you can't make it yet, just plan out the systems that you need in the game, the features that you want, how you want your first game to look like. Then I want you to take out 3 essential systems that you know you're going to need in this game and just make them separately. Just make like this very specific system in like a separate project, and then just make it in a reusable way so that you can use this code in this new project for this prototype in your first game when you start. So let's say you're making a mobile game, for example. The core system there can be, for example, a shop system. So you just make a shop system in like a project. You're also probably going to need like the core mechanic, like the thing that the player does. So you make that, let's say it's like the movement or dashing or like jumping, whatever. Make that in a new separate project. You might also need a settings system. So implement a settings system, right? Then you're going to have the files of these 3 projects. When you start your first game, you can implement these 3 systems. And since the 3 prototypes that you made, let's say you have the movement, you have a store system, and then you have a settings, it's just all about like connecting them together. And since you made it in an expandable way, and you already like finished basically like 70% of your first game already by just like making the project and connecting 3 systems together. And this is going to be the lowest friction way. This is what I teach inside of my course, this exact system, how you're going to do it in more detail. And it's just the best and simplest way for you to actually finish your first game. because I can tell you to start from 0 and then build up. But it's much better if you just do 20% of the task beforehand, and then you just like implement it in. And then like 20% here, you already have prepared this 20%, okay, 20% here. Then you have the third system, 30% here, and then 60% of your first game is already done just by you making the systems and connecting them. And that's going to be so much simpler for you to finish, because then you can just focus on the 40%. So that can be like polishing, for example. It can be implementing, that can be implementing some other things that you need in your game, like some enemies or like obstacles, whatever. And just publishing the game, like the store page and stuff. You can focus on these other things because the systems are already finished. If you want to learn from me and have this step-by-step system for you to release your own game in only 60 days or less, 100% guaranteed, then you can click the first link below. You can join my programs called Smartini. It's a completely free community, and you also get the start of the course completely for free, so that you can get started there, and also you get some other cool bonuses for free as well. So you can check that out. It's completely free to join, and yeah, I'll see you inside.